My name is Therese Cameron. I'm a whistleblower for unprofessional behaviour and criminal behaviour by New South Wales Health. But let me take you back to 2023. In 2023, I submitted to the Australian Human Rights Commission an airtight case that I knew I would win and that I did eventually win. So that airtight case was breach of my medical and religious human rights over the COVID vaccines and mandates. Now the reality is we believe that in order to make that COVID vaccine, they used at least 200 attempts to extract samples from live fetuses, live babies. Now, what they do to get that live fetal sample of the tissue is they go into the sternum. The live aborted fetus has to be alive to get the live sample. So they put a needle in to the sternum and pull out that sample. It is the most painful thing I have ever seen in my 40 plus years of nursing, is an extraction from sternum of sternal tissue. This is sadistic in the extreme, and yet this is what was used in our COVID vaccines. And I asked our politicians, I wrote to them and said, where did these babies come from? Were they Chinese political prisoners? So 240 samples is a lot. Now we know with one of the other vaccines, I think it's the MMR, that they actually had 8 attempts, and that particular fetus was in the United Kingdom, a woman in a psychiatric unit. So her little boy, he was aborted. They used the baby to try to get the extraction out, and they keep regrowing those samples. So that was 8 attempts. So with these babies, with this religious human rights win that I won that is being so censored, were these Chinese political prisoners that were used, and how many children, what consents did the parents give? I wrote to the government asking for this information. Nothing was provided. The fact that I eventually went to the Human Rights Commission and won my case speaks volumes to the fact that baby fetal tissues were used. The fact that it's extremely sadistic the way that they do it is really disappointing and very, very concerning. Now, what happened after I put in the case is I did happen to get a job with New South Wales Health in Far West New South Wales. I had a contract with an agency. Right at the end of the contract, with 2 back-to-back contracts actually, and they did offer me a third, but I didn't want to stay there. I realised I'd been subject to wage theft, and my own union tried very much to reverse that. Now my manager was on the board of the nurses union, so how am I subject to wage theft when supposedly my manager is on the board of a nurses union? It's quite the question. Now this is a court proven fact, because what then happened was I kept negotiating back and forward. New South Wales Health threatened me with litigation if I ever contact them again, even though they were in breach of contract and wage theft. So eventually, after I negotiated back and forward, they offered me a non-disclosure agreement of $5,400, which I turned down, wrote a whistleblower statement about this particular manager. Now, she has been removed from the workplace and had actually, even at that time, apparently been removed. But the reality is, then she wrote a complaint about me on the back of this complaint that was never properly investigated. It showed no wrongdoing, it showed no mental health issues, and in fact now that it's gone to court, all of the evidence that I've put into the court has been validated as such. I did suffer wage theft. There was a fraudulent documented contract which went into the court, so that has been validated. There was threats of litigation prior to me approaching the New South Wales Premier's Department. The New South Wales Premier's Department in September of 2024 made New South Wales Health back pay me, and yet somehow in the November, after New South Wales Health was proven to be guilty of wage theft, somehow there's a letter of complaint that was taken seriously. Now that letter of complaint I took to New South Wales Police. They took one look at it. Initially they said, look, we're not looking at that because you're not senior with New South Wales Health. They looked at it, they immediately did register a case for investigation because I am well aware that New South Wales Police were aware she had already been removed from that particular workplace, the lady who wrote the letter. So I actually had a fraudulent contract wage contract that I was able to prove was fraudulent, and that my nursing agency contract was the real deal. And then after writing a fraudulent contract, there was a fraudulent letter of complaint that had all sorts of information in it that I was able to validate was not true. So it's quite an issue. That has now been, the complaint went through to the XCCC. They dropped the case because you can't actually use a hearsay complaint. It doesn't stand any court of law. They apparently found no wrongdoing as such, and there was no wrongdoing. But on the 31st of March in 2025, after I said, well, you still owe me the rest of that money because you have not paid me to my lawful, because legally you actually have to pay somebody to their actual lawfully attained qualification. Now, I attained clinical nurse consultant. I had worked in New South Wales Health at that level, and I'm actually not just the first nurse in New South Wales, but the first nurse in Australia to be issued a Medicare provider number. That was issued under a diabetes educator status, not the status of nurse practitioner, which is slightly different. Nurse practitioners did not come into existence for another few years. So here am I, supposedly good enough to get a Medicare provider number, but somehow the first and only complaint that's ever gone in about me, written by somebody who had already been removed from her job, is taken seriously. We've gone back and forth to the court. They've provided no actual clinical evidence whatsoever. They've subpoenaed evidence they thought existed and realised it doesn't exist. They did 2 subpoenas, and on a hospital where my cousin happened to be on the board, trying to say that I'm mentally ill. So they have not got the evidence. Now, I actually do have evidence that New South Wales Health themselves have been using my business name extensively, and that somebody won a Premier's Award back in 2015 in my business name, and I've submitted part of that as part of a complaint to APRA. So New South Wales Health are in breach of conflict of interest because they've been getting they've been publishing research, apparently, my understanding, getting research grants in my business name, which is Diabetes Alliance, ASIC registered business name. So I'm in a very difficult position where they've, I'm saying they're being quite not as honest as they could be would be an understatement. The fact that a whistleblower can be put upon in this way is a really big concern. So I'm asking for as much help as we can get. Now, back to the Human Rights Commission case. In May of 2024, the case was heard. It is now under a non-disclosure agreement as such, but I can still say and tell you that how and why I won is because of the fetal cells and the number of attempts, which apparently, as I said, was at least possibly 240 attempts just for one of the vaccines to get a live fetal cells. Apparently they grow the viruses on those fetal cells. Who knows why they do that? The process itself is horrible to think that actually could even happen on this planet. It's really a big concern. And as I said, were these Chinese political prisoners? Where did these babies come from? And why were the public not told? Why are doctors not aware? Why are our nurses not aware? So please make sure you educate your doctors and nurses that it's a long history of using fetal cells in vaccines. They're now trying to maybe stop doing that, which is nice, but there's still some vaccines that do have fetal cells. So I'd like to thank you for listening to me today, and certainly I'm looking for some help. If anyone wants some interviews, like how I explain it for the human rights case, that would be fine with me. So thank you very much. Thank you.
It's bloody witchcraft.
What's witchcraft? Oh yeah, it's witchcraft. It's satanic witchcraft.
Potions, rat's tail, eye of newt.
Yeah.
Sternum of baby.
Yeah, I know. It's
what the fuck?
And do you think I can get
who dreams this shit up?
Do you think I can get anyone to interview me? So it is satanic. So what happened to me the week that I won my human rights case, because some of the journalists didn't know about it, I had 8 journalists look at my LinkedIn profile. So they know full well about this. 8 of them. But I actually did speak to somebody who told me that, and I won't say which channel it was, but one of the channels, they had to sign an agreement not to do anything or say anything about the COVID vaccine to keep their jobs.
Yeah.
So to keep their jobs, some of these journalists they were silenced. And that's what I was informed. I was chatting in a swimming pool, but, and so you don't know how truthful that is, but she said it was somebody she knew really well. I don't know how these people sleep at night. And we know that this
must be heavily medicated.
Yeah, well, who knows? And we know that this particular vaccine exacerbates cancers and causes turbo cancer. And that's how I was able to get my medical exemption, because it has come out that that's actually something that happens. It's just the way it's designed.
Yep.
And it sounds good, like the science sounds like, that's fantastic that it does this and does that and it's going to attack the virus, but it also, unfortunately, has a similar effect with cancer, where cancers are able to run riot, which is a really big, it's really an issue. It's disappointing. So, and then the issue we have is if we have got corrupt people in our health system doing what's happened to me, so someone very senior producing a fraudulent document of contract, and that has been proven in a court that it was fraudulent and by the New South Wales Premier's office, and yet she's still on the board of the New South Wales Nurses Union. And it's, how does this even happen? I just find it incredible that there is this level of corruption. And she's, at least to New South Wales credit, she's not with them anymore. She was removed from New South Wales some time ago, but I'm very concerned.
How did they get this person that was stood down to complain?
She was stood down on 6 months leave. So I don't know how that happened as well. That would be very interesting to know how that happened, and that she could write a letter of complaint on a New South Wales letterhead, but it was signed off by more senior people who can be held accountable, because it was written as if she was still in the workplace, still at job.
Oh, this is all recorded.
It was written as if she's still working at the workplace, and yet as soon as the police looked at her, they're like, because they know why she was, they know exactly why she wasn't at the workplace and why she was removed. So she was not at that workplace at that time, but somehow remains on the board of the Nurses Union. Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, I have asked some the questions, did she make sure that when she re-registered with APRA that they were aware of any possible criminal charges to do with why she was removed from her workplace? And, how does this... Yeah. They
can only contain this
Yeah.
mountain of information for so long.
Exactly.
Eventually it's just going to spew out.
Multiple nurses got paid back pay, and one of them, she got back paid 2025 after this woman was terminated, and yet she had had problems since 2021, she told me. And even when I worked there in 2023, she was saying, I'm not being paid properly. How does that happen when your boss is on the board of the Nurses Union? This is not on. This is really not on that this would happen. Something's very wrong, and it comes from the very top. So I don't know who's running the nurses and midwives now, but it always comes from the top. So we really, really need to look at that. Yeah. So
I wonder how high the top is.
Well,
I think there's a secret top.
There might be a secret top, you're right. It's come out publicly that Australia apparently, and they haven't mentioned any of the health systems, but that a lot of government organisations were involved in money laundering for the Epstein money, and it was a lot of the government systems, and that's come out. There's a guy in South Australia who's done some research on that, and it's shocking the number of sort of banks and different organisations that were named in the Epstein files as money laundering for the Epstein child rape and sex trafficking. So, we're talking a lot of money. People don't understand how big this problem is, and there were many, many islands. And apparently Australia was the space where you launder your money. Aren't we lucky? So it's more important. It's more important here in Australia than anywhere else on the planet, I believe, to ensure that people are held accountable, because eventually that will happen, and the public servants who don't do their jobs properly, who don't maintain or breach their fiduciary duty, they may find themselves in jail as well. And often that's sometimes how it happens. It's not necessarily the person who committed the crime, it's often sometimes the person who overlooked it. And that used to happen.
It's important putting them off the rotten tree.
Yeah.
Because
well, the people who don't.
That's applying pressure to every other puppet who serves these.
Yeah, they just.
And they've got to know that they're going to get plucked off the tree.
Absolutely.
And once that starts to happen.
Yeah. And there has been instances, but we don't get told about it, where people are in jail for this type of thing here in Australia. And the other thing that people are not aware of, there was something called the Chevron case. So if you're a public servant, the Chevron case was passed in the 1980s, and it protected all public servants from all of their decisions. Well, guess what? That's been overturned, and that does relate to Australia. So it was passed in America, it's now been overturned by in the US. So it means that every single Australian government servant can be held financially liable for their decisions, which is huge. There's also the other issue that a lot of government organisations are registered with an ABN. That ABN is registered in turn on the Australian Stock Exchange. Who knows why that is? But guess what? The Australian Stock Exchange is registered in the US, Washington DC, and Washington DC is under direct military control. So my question is, if, can they be sued under the RICO laws? They may well find they can be. Because we used to be able to sue in the UK, if you remember, years ago. We could go to the UK and sue people. So can all of these people who are being bullied and what have you, people who are in jail, can they sue under the RICO laws, which means the people responsible can lose every last cent they've got. So people just do not get how big that is, the fact that we are registered in Washington DC and that Trump signed an agreement that the military is running Washington DC. And certainly since 2017 I've been watching things happening in the background, and there have been a lot of people resigning from very high positions, and it's quite interesting how many people have been smiling. It's very interesting how many people have gone down. And it's my understanding that some do deals and some don't do deals, some are arrested. And I remember and people don't like the current president, but the first day he got into power, there was a journalist who lost her job for speaking truth about one particular issue, and when he was being inaugurated, she was down at Guantanamo Bay. Yeah, and they filmed her walking into Guantanamo Bay. In other words, there is something happening down here, guys. There are people being arrested, and I have reason to believe that Australia is involved as well, because we're part of the Five Eyes.
Yeah.
So, we're named in the Epstein files a lot. And if we are the money laundering centre, then the military will be, US military will be really interested in what's happening here. Because they want to know where that money's gone. Because the best way to remove the deep state is to remove the money. So that's quite an interesting thing to think about. Yeah.
And as David McBride said, we are the lucky country.
We are the lucky country. We are.
And we've got to get back to being the lucky.
Exactly. We need to remove these people from high positions. How anyone could write a court-proven fraudulent document and not be in jail for wage theft is outrageous, and still be on the board of the Nurses Union. Just unbelievable. And if anyone from the Nurses Union, New South Wales Nurses Midwives Union wants to contact me, more than happy. This is a court-proven fact. Thank you. And New South Wales Premier's Office fact that it was a fraudulent document. So, we need to clean up this mess.
What's the best way to contact you? Put a comment in the YouTube comment with their email address?
Yes, they could put a comment in the...
or something?
Yeah. Come here to Town Hall on Fridays, 5 to 7. So when I worked at Concord Hospital many years ago, we became the first hospital in Australia to actually get sort of the computer system where we could put our notes into the computer and things like that. And we had 2 people on site from a company called Digital, and they were very proud of themselves. They were there for 3 months. We had been the military hospital, so I'm actually technically a Veterans Affairs nurse, and I still stayed apparently under that banner, not New South Wales Health banner, when New South Wales Health did take over the hospital. So yeah, we became the first hospital in Australia to get the computer system. And one day, 2 of the people the 2 computer experts who had been doing that happened to be in my workplace, and they looked white, they looked in shock. They couldn't believe it. They had found that Ward 14A, which was empty at the time, 14B had patients but not 14A, Ward 14A, which no longer exists, had a full patient flow, cash flow, staff flow, employment flow, everything. It was as if it was a real ward. And they knew it was empty. But what was shocking them even more was the fact that within only about 3 more days, they were going off site, and every other hospital in all of Australia was going to be rolled out digitally, remotely. So how would anyone ever know which wards were real and which wards were not? Not real. And I don't know what happened to those people. I know there was a bit of a kerfuffle at Concord Hospital at about that time, but I have no idea. And it never went public. Whole fake ward. So how many other wards in the system, how many other research projects, if they can do that, and we're talking 1995, we're talking 30 years ago, if that's the control they had. And what did they, I think it was, because we still had a lot of military people in the hospital, being a military hospital. What did one of the presidents say? Beware the industrial military complex. So who knows what was really going on behind the scenes? I certainly don't.
Well,
I was just a young nurse.
The guy that wrote Yes Minister knew something, because they had in there a fully functioning hospital but no patients.
I remember that episode in the Yes Minister where they had a fully, because the patients were going to destroy it was going to be really difficult with patients in there. I remember that, was so funny. There is a big issue in our systems. Yeah, definitely. So.